Disclaimer: illustrations may or may not be 100% historically accurate.
In 1519, Hernán Cortés arrived in Mexico. Eventually, he reached the city of Tabasco and was warmly welcomed with gifts including gold, silver, and women. The Spanish believed that they were perceived as gods.
Little did they know that Montezuma II, the Aztec emperor at the time, thought that giving the Spanish these gifts would convince them to leave. However, the Spanish understood this generous gesture as a greater reason to stay. It was misinterpretations like these between the two cultures that played a factor in the downfall of the Aztec Empire. While Cortés remained in the city of Tabasco, Montezuma sent men and continued to spy on him, keeping a careful eye on the actions of the strangers. The Spanish were enjoying their time until Cortés found out the Aztecs planned to attack the conquistadors, giving them time to plan a counterattack.
On top of knowing about the upcoming battle, and in addition to the Spanish technological superiority in warfare such as horses, weapons, armor, and helmets, the Spanish had another advantage over the Aztecs in battle. Aztec culture dictated a more scheduled and organized battle where a time, place, and manner is set prior to the event taking place. When the Spanish were going against Cuauhtémoc, the last Aztec emperor, the emperor wore an armor of feathers, as it was believed to make the Spanish retreat upon seeing its majestic beauty. Unfortunately, the differences in conceptions about warfare worked against the Aztecs, leading to a clear victory for the Spanish.
However, in order to fully understand the meeting of two worlds, we must also examine the way in which Aztec societies operated prior to contact with the Europeans.
Before the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors, such as Cortés and Geronimo de Aguilar, the Aztecs had an established way of life with a clear system of beliefs.
The Aztecs followed a 13-month cyclical calendar consisting of 20 days per month. They also believed in prophecies and the cyclic nature of the timeline, meaning that events had a potential to be repeated on the same day in future years. Everything that happened within Aztec society was ordained or predicted. Anything out of the ordinary was blamed on bad omens or supernatural causes.
One such thing that was attributed to bad omens were the health issues of the population. If one were to experience poor health symptoms, Aztecs regarded the cause to be supernatural. This was because their hygiene standards were held to such a high caliber that there would be no other explanation for the sickness. The civilization ordinarily cleaned the streets to the point where shoes were not needed to walk along the roads. The implementation of public bathrooms in every community also kept contamination at a minimum, since they were distanced from clean water supplies provided by aqueducts. The Aztecs also experimented with medicinal herbs to keep public health at an optimum level, increasing cure rates and decreasing the spread of diseases. Furthermore, the cremation of the dead kept decomposing contaminated flesh from being in contact with people, reducing the spread of pathogens. These practices prevented any known cases of epidemics among the Aztec population.
There are some records and books on other Aztec practices that describe different funeral rites depending on how a person died. How they died also influenced where their soul or being went. For example, people who died in battle were cremated, and women that died in childbirth were buried in a specific temple. But in the end, both went to solar heaven. Class was also thought to play a part in rites, with the lords or the elites typically being cremated. As well, people were often buried with food and other objects for the afterlife. This example of funeral practices shows how we have contradicting information from this time period, and that there was a range of practices which were not always applicable to all of the Aztec people, and there were inconsistent records.
After the Spanish conquest, Aztec society drastically changed. The spread of diseases grew rampant due to less hygienic practices and significantly lower maintenance of public waste disposal systems. The lack of immunity that Aztecs had against European diseases such as smallpox also led to a notable reduction in the Aztec population. As stated by Valderas, quote, "Epidemics proved a vital ally in the Spaniard domination of the local population," end quote.
Catholic practices and beliefs were different. They involved only burials when a person passed away, and they believed that a person's actions during their lifetime dictated where their soul went in the afterlife. However, not all the Aztec culture was lost when the Aztec Empire fell. For example, hospitals around this time had churches and cemeteries nearby, and the burial practices in these cemeteries reflected both the customs of the Aztec people and the Spanish. At these hospitals run by the Spanish, everyone was buried. However, they were buried with objects which sometimes included crosses. This is an interesting combination of both cultures that shows that people retained some aspects of their original culture. This example shows us that customs, traditions, practices, etc. had changed with the Spanish conquest, but were not exact copies of the way things were done in Europe. There was still an influence of the native people.
The Spanish ultimately instigated the downfall of the Aztecs and began the creation of what we now know as modern-day Mexico.